error handling, like in case if we get any errors while installing, what are the places we need to verify. So those kind of things also we discussed in yesterday class. So when I didn't get a time to that particular session because yesterday, so maybe probably I'll spend some time today and tomorrow so to get the solution for that. So anyway, we installed SQL Server on VMware machine. So we successfully installed the SQL Server 2016 on the VMware machine. So that SQL Server name is SQL Server 2016. Okay. So that's about the previous things which we covered. So in today class, what we are going to discuss means we are discussing about the post installation steps, or maybe simply we can call it as a configuration steps, post installation or configuration. And after that, if we have a time, then we will look into the how to add new features to the existing SQL Server. Like in yesterday, we install only database engine services for SQL Server 2016. Maybe in the later time, maybe customer will come to us, and then he may ask to add more service to the existing SQL Server. So then those kind of situations, how we can add more services to the SQL Server, that we will discuss in today class if we have time after discussing about uh, post installation steps. Right? So when it comes to the installation, so when it means once you hand over to the server, that means before handovering, we need to also complete the post installation steps. Now we'll directly go to the post installation steps. So the first step is that the first post installation or configuration step is that we need to verify the summary.txt file. We already know about the summary.txt file. So whenever we install or uninstall, or when we're doing any updates, when you install the product updates on the particular operating system or SQL Server, that information will be updated in the summary.txt file. So to verifying this file, why we need to verify the means, we have to get the details whether whatever component we selected, whether all the components are successful or failed. To getting the kind of information, we need to verify the summary.txt file. So by default, irrespective of the drive you selected for the installation, this file summary.txt file will be created in C format. So 110 for 2012, and 120 for 2014, and 130 for 2016, and setup bootstrap log summary.txt file. So go to the server. Maybe sometimes what happen in real time, somebody will install the SQL Server and we need to configure the we need to set the configuration settings. That time, so better we can verify summary.txt file whether the installation was successful or not. Go to C program files, Microsoft SQL. This is for 2016 installation, so we have to click 130 folder and then go to setup bootstrap. And there we can see the log folder. There we have a summary.txt file. Okay, here we can see that the final result is faster and what time started, what time ended, and operating system name, mission name, and then mission version, language, and which SQL Server version we already installed.
మల్లేష్
And
వాయిస్ కొద్ది
in the
క్లియర్ గా
bottom
లేదు.
of the file. Okay, sorry.
బాగా బ్రేక్ అవుతుందండి.
అది యాక్చువల్గా ఇంటర్నెట్ మొబైల్ పవర్ పోయేసరికి డిస్కనెక్ట్ అయితే నేను మొబైల్ కనెక్ట్ అయ్యాను. ఐ థింక్ ఒక్క నిమిషం ఉండండి, రూటర్ వెళ్ళి చెక్ చేస్తాను అది ఆన్. Okay, now you want to see the kind of problem. So right, so like the first step in the post installation steps or configuration is that verifying the summary.txt file. So The file exists in the C drive, C program files, Microsoft SQL Server, based on the version. So the folder we need to select. If it is a 2016, then we have to select the 130, set up bootstrap log, and there we can see the summary.txt file. This one. So in the bottom of the file, we can see the what components we selected for the installation and the status. We can see that here we can see the password. So we have to ensure we need to verify this file to ensure everything is installed properly on the machine. So that is the first step, and then the second step is verify the protocols are enabled or not. By default, all protocols are enabled. In case for any reason, if protocols are not enabled, we need to enable. For enabling the protocols, we have to use the configuration manager. If you remember in the first class, we discussed about two tools. One is SSMS and the second one is the configuration manager. For enabling protocols or stopping and starting the services, all kind of operations we are doing using SQL Server configuration manager. And so once you open the SQL Server Configuration Manager, we have to go to SQL Server Network Configuration. There we can see this. So in this machine, I installed two servers, two SQL servers, Dev Server and SQL Server 2016. SQL Server 2016 we installed yesterday. So select the protocols for SQL Server 2016. So once you select in the left side, in the right side, we can see the different protocols. So these are the protocols used by the SQL Server. So mainly TCP/IP. So again, in the architecture class, we will discuss about all these three protocols. Just here, we just know the how to enable, how to verify the protocols are enabled or not. TCP/IP must be enabled even in real time or when you're practicing. So protocol just we have to by default in many situations. So by default TCP/IP will enable, but in this case it's not enabled. So we have to enable. So right click on the protocol and click enable. Don't worry about what this protocol, how this will be using, and what are the difference between these protocols. All the things we'll discuss in architecture classes. So better we can enable all three different type of protocols. So whatever changes, the very important point we have to keep in mind is that so whatever changes we are doing in the configuration manager, so in window configuration manager wizard, so we require restart to apply those changes. Like we changed the protocols, right? So after changing the protocols, we need to restart the services to apply those changes. I'm restarting the services. If you want to restart the services, right click on the particular service and then click restart button. So whenever we get any request for stopping or restarting, better always prefer to use the configuration manager. We have other ways like services.msc, and we can use the PowerShell command, SQL or SSMS also we can use to stop and start the services. But this is the preferable window for doing like stopping and restarting the SQL Server services, right? So better you can also restart the agent services.
Malesh, one question. Like we have two servers, right? See, with Dev server and SQL Server 2016. So both will have
Correct,
the
correct.
one server agent.
No, each server has its
Okay, there
own
are
agent service. Yeah.
agents.
So
Okay,
because when you select the database engine services contain two different services. One is SQL Server, and then second one is the SQL Server agent services. So again, so here if you want to look for differences, so SQL Server mainly we are using. So here we can see that SQL Server Dev Server, SQL Server Agent Dev Server, SQL Server 2016, SQL Server Agent. So the difference between these two services comes when you select the database engine service, but these two services performing the individual operations. Like the SQL Server is mainly using for database management operation like transaction related, all database related operations. The second service, SQL Server Agent Service. Agent service we are using for scheduling, automating, and jobs, alerts, monitoring purpose. These kind of things will do by using the agent services, right?
okay,
So that's mean even if agent service is down, there is no impact for the business operations, but any schedule operations like jobs or maintenance plans or alert mechanism, if they are dependent on the particular agent service, those will not run, right?
And what
And
about browser?
yes, I'm coming to the browser service. So browser service means it will automatically, dynamically assign the port numbers for SQL Server. That's mean every SQL Server it's run with its own port number. Like if you remember, when installing, we have two options like default instance and named instance, right? So if it is a default instance means whatever name the operating system is having, the same name will come to the SQL Server name, right? We know that. So when when it is a default instance, we don't need the browser services. We can storm the browser services because default SQL Server or default instance, generally we can call it as an instance or server, both the name, don't get confused. So either a server or instance, both representing the same thing. So like when installing the default SQL Server or default instance, so it will use the 1433 port number. So that's mean we don't require the browser service because it has the default port number, and we don't require the browser service. Why we require the browser service means when you're installing the named instances, named SQL Server, that time it will dynamically assign the port numbers. In our case, these two instances we installed as a named instances, right? So my operating system name is node 3. If I install as a default instance, my SQL Server name will be the node 3. But here I can see that dev server, SQL Server, dev server, SQL Server. That's when these two are named SQL servers. We specify the name during the installation. We must require the browser services, right? If browser services are not running, we cannot connect to the SQL Server. So browser service, the definition is that browser service is dynamically assign the port numbers to the SQL Server, right? If you want to see that which port number currently the browser service is assigning, if you want to see this kind of information, you can go to TCP/IP properties, IP addresses. In the bottom, we can see the TCP dynamic port numbers 49955. If it is a default instance, here you can see that 1433. That is the default instance port number. Right? So very important. Again, we will definitely discuss about browser services when it comes to the troubleshooting part. Because sometimes what happen in real time, maybe sometimes users will complain that we are not able to connect to the SQL Server. So one of the reasons is that if it is a deep named instance and the browser services are not running, obviously they won't connect to the SQL Server. The first thing we need to verify whether it is a named instance or default instance, and if it is a named instance, we need to ensure that the browser services are running. If it is not running, then we need to start it, right? So
Okay.
that's about the browser services.
And all the named instances will have only one browser. Like we have two different instances.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah. Yeah, we
Okay.
have only one per multiple. Here we install two SQL servers, but we have only one browser service.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
So like here, the another question is that like how we know that it is a default instance or named instance. If it is a default instance, SQL server, in the parenthesis, we can see the MS SQL server. If you see in the parenthesis MS SQL server, then that is the default instance. And here we can see the different name, dev server, SQL server 2016. That means it is a named instance, right? So that's mean. So the second configuration steps, back to the post installation step. The second step is that we need to verify whether protocols are enabled or not. If protocols are not enabled, we need to enable. After enabling the protocols, we need to restart the services. That's the second configuration step. The third one is that change minimum memory and max memory settings. So this is one of the recommended setting. Like in most of the environments, they prefer to use Microsoft is recommended is 70 to 80% RAM we need to allocate it to the SQL Server. For example, my operating system is running with 10 GB. So in most environments, 7 GB, 7 to 8 GB, they will allocate it to the SQL Server. That means we are giving the more room to the SQL Server operation because RAM is very important to perform the all kind of operations. So the Microsoft recommendation to assign the more RAM to the SQL Server. That's mean at least 70 to 80% RAM we need to allocate it to the SQL Server. Again, different organizations are following the different formulas. In the current project, for 1 GB to 100 MB, we are allocating to the operating system. For example, we have 10 GB. That's mean almost each GB 200 means almost 2000 MB we are allocating to the operating system. Okay, so that's mean we can in whatever calculation formulas they're using based on their standards we need to assign. But even if you get this question in interview point of view, we can simply say that as per Microsoft recommendations, 80 75 to 80% RAM we are allocating to the SQL Server, remaining we are allocating to the operating system, right?
So
So now we'll see
we need to allocate to the different instance. Now we have two instances, right? We need to share that memory to two instances, like 5
two
or 3 3.
instances, but 99.99% in real-time environment we have only one instance per operating system.
Okay.
Okay, nobody recommended to install the multiple instances. So maybe if it is a development server, we can install multiple. Even if it is a pre-production or production, we won't recommend it to install the multiple instances. Okay,
Okay.
no need to worry about it, right?
Thanks.
Now we'll see that how to allocate the memory to the SQL server, right? Go to properties and then go to memory. So if you after connect to the server, go to properties, and then the left side we can see the memory. Click the memory, and here we can see that min memory and max memory. Min means it's no need to specify that, so that's mean if you specify the 200 or 500 MB, that's mean it's at least it's required that amount to start the SQL Server services. Even you no need to, you can just go with the 0. But when it comes to the maximum server memory, so based on your organization standards, we have to assign. Like here we can remove this value, and for example 10 GB RAM. When it is a 10 GB RAM, it's nearly comes to, that's mean 70% means 8650 something. That's the RAM we need to, that's the size we need to allocate it to the operating system, right? So we have to calculate the percentage, and the percentage value we need to specify it here. It is in MB, we need to specify the value in MB. Then after that we need to click OK. So it's running on VM, so it has only one GB RAM, so I don't want to assign. But in real time you must enable this option, I mean enter the value here based on the your organization standards. So that's the third configuration setting. And the fourth one is that enable fail logins only in security tab. Again, so these settings we are using to track the fail or successful logins information. For doing this ones, again we have to connect to the server and go to properties. In the properties, in the left side, we can see the security tab. Click the security tab. Here we can see that login auditing. So here we can see the none, failed logins only, successful logins only, both failed and successful logins, right? So that's mean by default values failed logins only. That's mean whenever anyone failed to connect to the SQL server, that information we can track in SQL Server error log. So we have a separate class for SQL Server error log. Just note the point here. So that's mean if you select the fail logins, all information we can find in SQL Server. None means nothing we can find in SQL Server. And successful logins only means whoever successfully connected to the SQL Server, those connections information we can see. When it comes to the final option, both failed and successful logins means whether failed or successful, both connections information you can find. So most of the environments, they just go with the failed logins only. In some projects or maybe some organization, they prefer to go with the both failed and successful logins. So in the previous project, we used only failed login, but here the current project we are using both failed and successful logins. I just wanna go for only failed logins only for this configuration. Again, it's depend on again your standards, and that's the fourth configuration settings. And then coming to the fifth one, so no need to worry about the fifth one. Fifth one is related to 32-bit operating system. And again, we cannot find 32-bit operating system nowadays in any kind of environment. Even Microsoft is strongly recommended to use the 64-bit. I think from SQL Server 2016 onwards, we don't have a 32-bit. We have only 64-bit. We don't have an option for 32-bit. So these settings using for 32 bits, again, so no need to worry about it. If it is a 32-bit SQL Server or operating system, then we need to enable these switches, 3G switch or PIE. That's mean 32-bit means 32-bit operating system. Even it has more RAM, but it will try to use only 2 GB. If you want to use more GB on that particular operating system, we need to enable these settings. Again, these are Windows related. If any case, if we get this kind of request, we can depend on the Windows team and we request them to enable 3G switch or PIE for SQL Server for using more RAM. Again, so no need to worry about in real time. Again, we won't get this question in interview point of view. And then the next setting is that enable XP command cell database mail remote ADAC remote queries and the surface area configurations. Okay. For enabling this one, again we have to go to SQL Server and right click on the server after connecting, and there we can see the facets. Click the facets, and then here in the drop we have to click the drop down box. There we can see SQL surface area configuration, and here we can see the different properties. XP command cell. So in many environments, especially the banking or insurance or maybe where it is secure, they feel secure the data. They don't prefer to enable the XP command cell. Command cell creates the Windows process that's the same security rights as the SQL Server. That's mean so XP command cell, like whoever connect to the operating system with administrator, they have get the same kind of permissions on SQL Server. And again, so XP command cell we are using to execute the batch scripts or maybe PowerShell scripts directly in SQL Server, right? So, many organizations, as for my knowledge, many organizations they don't encourage to enable this one. In some organizations, they are enabling. In the current project, we are enabling the XP command cell. We want to enable, so select the XP command cell and click True button. The same for other like database mail. So later classes will discuss about database mail. So this is using this database mail will get the information from SQL Server. So if we want to configure database mail, then we need to enable database mail. And ad hoc remote queries. So this is for executing the distributed queries. Again, if you want to do that, then we have to enable the ad hoc remote queries. And the next one is remote DAC. This is very important. Remote DAC. DAC means dedicated administrator connection. So this is important one. Sometimes maybe some reasons SQL Server won't allow us to connect any users. Those kind of situations we can use the remote DAC, dedicated administrator connections. Using these connections, we can connect to the SQL Server, right? If we not enable, so we cannot connect where when if we encounter the kind of situations where SQL Server is not accepting any connections. Okay, so these are the important settings we need to enable. Maybe based on organization standards, these are the basic or standard settings. Maybe if they're following any other settings, then here we have to enable those settings. Okay.
Can you come again on the 3 points, Malesh? Just a
Yeah.
bit.
So for that, go to the server, surface area configuration. And here XP command cell mainly we are using for like Windows related batch script, PowerShell script. And like generally people say that XP command cell is creating a lot of security things because like whatever Windows permissions, I mean whatever maybe if you connect operating system with the administrator privileges, they get the kind of privileges, they have permission to execute some commands code on the SQL Server. So that's the reason they are not enabled to, they don't prefer to enable the XP command cell. So if you want to do some batch scripts, you want to execute or related to operating system related information, if you want to get in SQL Server, that time we need to enable the XP command cell. The second one is that database mail. So the database mail this is the one of the functionality which we can use to receive the information from the SQL Server. So in the automation classes, we will discuss what kind of information we'll receive, how to enable, how to configure database mail, all these things. So for configuring database mail, we need to enable the database mail and ad hoc remote queries. Like we have a distributed queries. For example, we have instance 1, instance 2, instance 3. You're executing a query on instance 1, but you need to get the data from the other instance 2 and instance 3. So the kind of queries we can call it is a distributed queries. So if you want to execute the kind of queries, we can use the ad hoc remote queries enable. And the next one is that dedicated remote dedicated connection. Generally, you can call it as a DAC. So DAC is an emergency connection, so which allows to connect to the SQL Server. Some situations maybe it won't allow us to connect any users. That time we can use the dedicated administrator connection to connect to the SQL Server. So again, we will use the DAC when we are in the when you are in the server corruption. That time we'll see the how to connect the DAC, how to use the DAC connection to connect to the SQL Server. Right? Any questions, Sanjay?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So that's about the one of the configuration settings. Then move to the next one. Create MDB files based on the processors in a separate RAM. So the one up. So this is very important interview question. If you're specifically looking for interview, what are the recommended configuration settings for TempDB? The first configuration recommended setting is that we need to place the TempDB files in a separate RAM. The second one is that TempDB files we need to create based on the logical processor count. So Microsoft recommendation is that if a logical process count is 8 or below, we have to use the same number. If it is more than 8 logical processors, we can use the 8 as the TempDB, 8 TempDB files we need to create. Still, if you're having TempDB contents and problems, then we need to add more files, right? So that's the second important setting. And the third one is that uh, we need to create the TempDB files with the equal size and equal auto growth settings. And the fourth TempDB configuration setting is that we need to enable trace flags 1117 and 1118. So these are the four important TempDB configuration settings, very important interview question. Right. So now from 2016 onwards, if you remember in yesterday 2016 installations, we have an option to configure the TempDB files, like specifying the equal size, equal autograph settings, and it will automatically detect the logical processors. Right. So that's mean almost two important settings we can do during the configuration. And again, the separate temp drive also we can specify during the installation. And coming to the trace flags 1117 and 1118. From 2016 onwards, these are the default trace flags. So that's mean no need to enable it from 2016 onwards. These are the changes happened for TempDB. But before 2016, like in 2012, 2014, we need to enable these two trace flags, 1117 and 1118. So what these trace flags and how to enable? So that's mean 1118 means at a time. For example, in the database architecture classes, we'll discuss about how data will comes to the databases. So that's mean the data will be stored into the pages. Like 1118 means it will assign the 8 pages 64 KB data at a time. Generally one page contains 8 KB data. One page is completed, then it will request for the another page. But when you enable 1118, at a time it will assign the 8 pages to the process. That means no need to waiting for the data processing. So it will improve the TempDB process. Okay, so don't worry about, just here remember we need to enable 1118 and 1117 for improving the TempDB performance. In the later classes you'll understand how it will improve that. Right. 1118 means it will assign the 64 KB data at a time. Just understand for now. And the second trace flag is 1117. 1117 is controlling to maintain the equal size in all files. That means if we create 4 files, the data will, if you not enable 1117, that means one file will usually increase and then second other file will not increase. The data will not increase. So, but when you enable 1117, so it will try to maintain the equal size for all the MDB files. Right now we'll see that how to enable trace flags, but from here important point is that from 2016 onwards we don't need to enable 1117 and 1118. These are the inbuilt trace flags. If you want to enable trace flags, again we have to use the configuration manager and then go to service, select the on which SQL server you want to specify those trace flags. We have to select the service, go to properties and starter parameters here, and here we need to specify, okay, t we have to specify t 1117 and 1118. Click add button, apply and click ok. And after enabling trace flags, whatever the core important point is that, so whatever changes we are doing here, the restart is needed. Just remember that point. Right. So that's why we can enable. And if you like here we can see the other two trace flags, 1112 and 1222, 1204. So these two trace flags we are using to trace the deadlock information. What is deadlock, how to create deadlock, that we'll discuss in the next class, later classes. But if you want to find the deadlock information, we need to enable 1222, 1204. Again, so you can follow the same. Just go to the configuration manager and enable trace flags -t 1222. Click add -t 1204. Click add button and click apply. And it is always saying that any changes made will be saved. However, they will not take effect until the service is stopped and restarted. Click OK and restart the services. So that's about the eighth. The ninth one is that configure and schedule backup and maintenance jobs, alerts, and add the server in monitoring activity. Okay, again, so we have a separate class for configuring backups and maintenance plans and jobs and alerts. So we have to configure all the things. Just note the point. So in these the later classes, I think we have a 2-day session for configuring, scheduling, maintenance jobs, alerts. That time we'll discuss. And the next one is that server in monitoring. Like if you are using any third-party monitoring tools, like we have various third-party tools available in the market. Like again, we have class for third-party tools. If you are using any third-party tools, we need to add the server in third-party tools. In most organizations, we have a separate team for monitoring purposes. Like they are the responsible for installing and configuring monitor applications or servers. So if you have your permissions and if you know that how to add a server in a monitoring tool, we can add it, or maybe we can contact to the respective teams and we can take help from them to add the server in monitoring. Then after that, add the server add the server information in inventory list. This is very important. Like after installing the SQL Server, we have some specific information we need to maintain. Like who requested the server, who is that means simply can call it as a server owner, and what version, what editions, what is the configuration, and what is the secondary contact, email address, and the contact mobile information, everything, all this kind of information we need to maintain somewhere. So in most of the environments, they prefer to use third-party tools for maintaining the inventory, like CMDB. CMDB is one of the tool which we can use to store the all the inventory information. Like maybe in some organization they use central repository, central location, and they will update all their information in Excel sheet. So whatever options we have in your organization, based on the options or standards, we have to ensure to update the all correct information for the particular server. Like if something is happening or something you want to do that, so you need to contact the person, right? The server owner. When you have this kind of problem, you can get the details from the inventory, and we can contact them, right? So these are the post settings, post installation steps, or maybe simply called is the configuration settings. After completing all the steps, then only we have to hand over to the customer or maybe requester. Until complete all the steps, we should not assign the server to the user. I mean, we should not tell to the customer or maybe requester that everything is completed. So we have to ensure to complete all the options, and then we have to hand over. Again, these are the basic standard settings, configuration settings. Maybe different organizations are following the different configuration settings. So every organization, they have their own installation procedure document. Right? We should not install our own like knowledge and with our expertise. We should not install the SQL Server. We should strictly follow the organization standards installing the SQL Server. So whenever you go to any project, they have their own standards installation procedure. We must follow to install. Maybe in that in their standard they need to add more configuration settings, or maybe they have less configuration settings. Whatever they are following, we should follow the same, right? And in most of the environments, people also prefer to enable the one more important settings I did not add in the document. That is, go to properties, go to advanced. Here we can see that maximum degree of parallelism. So MACDOF, or maybe maximum degree of parallelism. That means so limit the number of processors to use the parallel plan execution. That means so based on the sockets, whatever sockets they are using for operating system, based on the socket count, they will use the maximum degree of parallelism. This is not a mandatory settings, but based on their standards they're using. So in the current organization, so we are using the maximum degree of parallelism. Based on the CPU sockets, we are enabling maximum degree of parallelism. If a server has two sockets, and each socket, maybe each socket it contains maybe three CPU, three cores, then the count will be the 3. So based on the logical processor in the socket, that number we are using for maximum degree of parallelism. So if not, maybe some organization they don't use the maximum degree of parallelism. If you're not using 0. Now the come to the what is maximum degree of parallelism, how it will be useful. So using the maximum degree of parallelism, we can limit the using of processors, limit the processors using. For example, if you're executing one transaction, so if you're not using the maximum degree of parallelism, that's mean the value is 0, and the server contains 4 logical processors, and you are executing the transaction, and it is a big transaction. What will happen if you not enable and executing the long transaction, or like a huge amount of transaction? So it will try to utilize the all the CPUs, all logical processors threads. But if you're limiting to, for example, my operating system has 4 logical CPUs, and maximum degree of parallelism 2 means whenever you're executing any query, it will try to use or depend on only the logical processors. That's mean limiting the processors uh, we can processor to use. We can use the maximum degree of parallelism. It's not mandatory setting, but based on the organization standards, we have to enable or maybe we can just go with the default setting, right? That's mean here if it is a 4, then it will try to use only 4 logical processors. If 0 means it will use the all available logical processors, right? So that's one of the settings. And from 2005 8 onwards, I think from 8 onwards we have from 2008 onwards we have a backup compress. We can reduce the size of the backup file. So if you want, you can also enable this one, compress backup option, right? And another important point is that during the installation, we are specifying the data file location, log file location, backup location, right? That information also we can see under database settings, data file, log file, backup. If we want to change the location, just click this button and specify the other location, right? If you want to use the different location, you can change it here, right? Data file location, log file location, and backup location. So these are the important settings we have to set after installing the SQL Server. Once complete all, then then after that we need to hand over to the customer that we can say that the server is ready for business operations. Now it's free to use to the SQL Server, so that we can communicate it with the customer. Right. So that's mean installation. That's a installation thing. So if we go to the content page, that's mean we completed full installation procedure, pre-installation, installation, post-installation. Also, we discussed about the troubleshooting thing. Right? So hope we are clear about installation. If we're clear about it, or if any questions, you can discuss. If we don't have anything, if you're clear about it, then we'll move to the next topic, that is adding or removing features. So now we look into the adding new features to the existing SQL Server. Right? For example, in yesterday we installed SQL Server 2016, right? 2016 we installed, and while installing we selected only database engine services. Now customer is asking, I need analysis services as well. Please install the analysis services to the SQL Server. So in that case, what we can do that? Again, we have to go to software. This is our software. Double click on it and go to the setup file. Again, for installation or adding new features, we have to select the installation tab and select the first option, new SQL Server standalone installation, or add features to an existing installation.
Which tab, Malish? I missed it. So installation. Which tab?
Sorry, for adding new features, we discussed about different features or different services, right? OLTP,
Same tab, right?
Yeah, same tab for adding or
Oh, okay, got it.
For installing or adding new features, we have to use the same tab. And then click next. Click next. Okay, so you can ignore this warning and can go to click next. Yeah, so this is the important one. For example, here for new installations, we have to select the default option, perform a new installation of SQL Server. And for if we want to add new features, then we have to select the second option, add features to an existing instance of SQL Server. And again, we have to select the instance. For example, here in this operating system, we have two 2016 SQL servers, Dev server and SQL Server 2016. Again, we need to select on which server you want to add these new feature. So here I'm selecting SQL Server 2016. Select the SQL Server 2016 and click next. And in the next tab, here we have to select the annual services. Okay, here we can, in this tab we can see all the services information or component. So here I want to install analysis services. I'm selecting the analysis services. Click next.
By any chance, can we deselect any options here?
No, we cannot. Only we have to uninstall, but here we cannot deselect. For example, so in the previous one we selected the database engine services. We want to So deselect means uninstalling.
The
So
control panel and uninstall option.
yeah,
Okay.
yes, yeah. Yesterday we seen that out uninstall. You can follow the same steps.
So we can select the service and then we can right click and uninstall the particular service, right?
Yes, correct, right. I'll show you then how to uninstall entire server or maybe how to uninstall only the particular specific component.
Okay.
So again, so we have to specify the service account here and then collision settings. So generally in real-time environment, we just go with the default collision settings. If you want, we can change it. Even after we can change it. Here I just want to go with the default collision settings and the default service account. And so analysis services are maybe data warehousing database we can call it. So here we have three different options. So the one of the difference is the normal database, and then data warehousing database is that in the data warehousing database we can view the data in multi-dimensional format. In three-dimensional format we can view the data, right? So that is the default option. So tabular mode and power pivot mode. So based on, I mean, we need to ask that when somebody is asking to install all services, what kind of mode we need to select. So tabular mode or multi-dimensional and data mining mode and power pivot mode. So most of the cases you just go with the multi-dimensional and data mining mode and add current users. Whoever adding here, they will be the admin. They will get the admin privileges in the particular database running database, and data directories. Again, it has data directory, log directory, temp directory, backup directory. So we have to specify that. Again, the recommendation is same. Like we have to use the separate drives for data, log, and backup, and the temp. Right. After specifying the directory details, then we have to click next. And so whenever we are adding or installing or uninstalling anything you're doing, so that information will be updated in the configuration file.ini. And the final step is click install. Yeah. Success status is succeeded. So now if you go to configuration manager, now we can see the annual services service. Refresh and we can see the SQL Server annual services. So if you want to connect annual services, so generally we want to manage these things. We have a separate team for doing that, MSPA team. But if you want to connect the annual services, here we have to select the annual services. Default is the database engine services. But if you want to connect annual services reporting integrations, we have to select the respective service server type. And so when you install in the first tab, if you want to see the name, install name, you can click the browse for more and then go to annual services. Here we can see that. Click copy and click connect. So that way we can connect the data warehouse and databases. Right. Now we are clear about how to add a new services to the existing SQL server. Right? So now, before uninstalling, before doing the uninstallation process, let me discuss few more things, the changes between 2012, 2014, and 2016. So we already discussed about Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, right? So before 2016, that's mean in 2012 and 2014, SSMS will install along with the SQL Server services, SQL Server installation. But from 2016 onwards, we need to install the SSMS separately. Let me go back to the installation document. Yeah. So here we can see that management tools, right? If you select the management tools, SSMS will install along with the SQL Server installation. This is applicable before 2016, but from 2016 onwards, we have to separately install the operating system. Sorry, SSMS. So here we can see that install SQL Server Management Studio. We can click this one, and then it will download from Microsoft site, and then we need to install it. Okay. So that's mean from 2016 onwards, we have to separately install the SQL Server Management Studio. Okay. So already I installed. So just we can follow the next. No need to do anything. Download the software. Click next. Nothing. We can do that.
Only SSMS or any other services will be installed, Malesh?
Only SSMS. Only tool will install. In
Okay.
when you install this one, only SSMS tool will install.
It's a client tool to connect to SQL Server database, right?
Like it's a editor, not connecting that. I mean, for example, if you remember, for executing the .NET related language, we'll use the Visual Studio. For Java related language, we can use the Eclipse, right? Writing the code and executing. The same way, for doing the all kind of DB related operations, we can use the SQL Server Management Studio,
Okay.
right? For creating the databases, all kind of operations we can do. Graphically we can do that. We can also do through command by using SSMS. For connecting SQL to Oracle, how, I mean, it's not SQL to Oracle. Client to SQL, how to connect, that we will discuss in the architecture procedure, like how the connection will establish between application to SQL Server.
Okay.
Okay, so that's about the, yes. And in 2017 onwards, reporting services, like during the installation, we can see in the services tab, we can see the services or features. There we can see the reporting services. But from SQL Server 2017 onwards, SQL Server 2017 and above version, reporting services also we need to separately install. So please note that these two important points. So now back to
So,
the uninstallation.
1 second. So in 2016, reporting comes along with to the software.
Right, from 2016 we have an option to select in the features, services and the features. But from 2017 onwards, again, how we are downloading separately as SMS and installing, the same way we have to install and install the reporting services from
Okay.
2017 and above versions.
And also SSMS, this one, would you need to install
Mm.
separately for 14 and 16 if I have two instances on the same server? How about that?
One is enough. One is enough. One SSMS is enough. No need to install separate one.
So
So
yeah, with respect to different versions as well, right? 14,
yeah,
12.
yeah. So if you're using this, this is the, I think this SSMS is the latest one. I think that's mean latest mean 2019 SSMS. This one I
Okay.
installed the latest SQL Server Management Studio. Using this one, we can connect 2014 instances, 2012 instances, 16, 17, 19, all kind of instances we can connect using this one. It is compatible with all. So no need to separately install the different management studios. One management studio is enough for connecting multiple servers.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So now back to the uninstallation procedure. For doing the uninstallation, so even if you want to uninstall entire SQL Server or only specific components or maybe features or services, if you want to do that, we have to use the control panel. Go to run command, type control panel, and uninstall program. And then here we have to select the 64-bit. Here we can see the multiple files, but so many people try to select the 60 setup file, but it's not a right file to select to uninstalling. So 64 2016 Microsoft SQL Server 2016 64, this is the right file. And here we have to click the remove. And here we have to select the instance. So 2016 instance, I want to SQL Server 2016 server, I want to uninstall. Click next. So if you want to uninstall all the entire server, then select all components. But you just want to uninstall only specific component, then select the particular component. Here I just wanna uninstall the annual services, so I'm selecting only annual services. If you want for entire server, select the all components. Click next. And click remove. So it's completed now, and close it. Now you go back to the configuration manager and you click refresh, then we don't see the annual services. Right? So that's the way we can uninstall entire server or maybe specific components. That clear? That means we completed the entire installation procedure. The pending one is the interview question and answers. So we have a one document for installation and patching. So after completing the patching, we'll discuss about the interview question and answer. So Monday we'll start the patching and service pack installations. Again, this is very important topic for DPS. So that will start on Monday. So tomorrow no class. And so now 11. So let's understand the now let's understand how to connect to the SQL Server. What are the different properties of SQL Server? So after installing SQL Server, we want to connect. We can use the SSMS, but there are many ways. So usually people prefer to use the SSMS. Right? So for connecting the server, go to search and type SSMS. You'll get the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. This is the latest version. I think 18 Management Studio 18 is the latest one. And click. And here we have to select the server tab. The default is database in service, and enter the server. So like when you're installing the first time, maybe it won't display the name here. So we have to use the browse and then click the database engine. There we can see the whatever servers we install. Select the right instance and click connect. And here no need to do anything, and click connect. We connected the SQL Server. Right. For example, for doing any operations, then we have to take the new query. So control N we can use it, or maybe we can click the new query option, new query button. So this window we can use for writing the code, executing the code, all kind of operations we can do that. So the left side window, this window for we can do the all kind of all graphical operations, geo mode operations, right? So here we have to write, for example, I'm using master database. Later we'll discuss about what is master. I want to see some data from the master database. Select star from. So writing the code here again. So don't worry. So we write very simple queries. So we don't write very big code. Very simple code like select star from sys logins. The kind of, no need to worry about coding. And once you write the code, we can select the code, and here we can see the execute button. Click execute button, and the bottom we can see the result information. Connect to the server and select the, if you execute any code, maybe sometimes we are getting the code from the developers for executing again. So connect to the server and select the right database. So here we have to use database option, and then go, and then we have to um, paste the code, and then we can use the execute button. Okay, or else control E or F5 button also we can use to execute the code, right? And then after that, coming to the other properties, we go to the properties. In the general tab we can see the product name, operating system name, and then platform 64 or 32-bit version, long ways, memory, processors, root directory, where an SQL Server system files are located, collision settings, clustering, and I said here those are the later classes we'll discuss. Again, those are enabled or not. The kind of all this information, like and information we can see that. Like somebody is asking, so what is the version, current version, which operating system, what is the RAM? So collision settings. If you get the kind of information, you can use the general tab. The second one is that memory, like memory allocations. We can use this one. So we can enable or maybe increasing or decreasing memory, can do that. So one question, important question, like do we require the restart after enabling, maybe after adding more RAM or removing RAM? So we don't require restart. It is a dynamic process. Dynamically, the RAM will allocate it to the SQL Server. Here we can see the processors information. What are the processors available? All this kind of information we can see. And in the security tab, we already discussed it, right? Login auditing, failed logins are successful, both failed or not. And authentications. Again, so during the installation, if you remember, we specified the SQL Server authentication. If you not specify, it will take the Windows authentication. If you want to change the authentication modes. So anyway, later in the security topic, we'll discuss more about authentication. But if you want to change the authentication mode, here we can use this security tab. We can use it. But here the important one is after changing the authentication mode, the restart is required. We must restart the SQL Server services to apply those changes. Right? Connections influence. Maximum number of concurrent connections are zero unlimited. That means there is no limit for SQL Server. We can connect the n number of connections. If we want to limit, we can limit here. For example, I'm using 20 or 200. So then only to accept the 20 connections at a time. Okay. In real time, we don't do any changes here. Just go with the default, that is 0. And we don't need to do any other settings here. We just go with the default. And the next one is that a database setting, and here compression. So we can, if you want to compress the backup whenever you're doing the backup, automatically the file will compress. If you want to use the settings, you can. And in the later classes, will another important value is fill factor that we'll discuss in the performance tuning classes. And here again, if you want to change the maximum degree of parallelism value, any configuration related, you can change it. Again, in the most of the organizations, they just go with the default settings. And if you want to give any permissions, anyway, we will discuss. We have a separate class for security permissions. That time we'll discuss how to grant permissions. If you want to grant any specific permissions, and if you want to see the what kind of permission the account has, if you want to see, we can see the permissions information here. Okay, so that's about connecting server and executing the operations. What are the important properties? So we have also other internal properties like database security. Later we will discuss all these components. Mm. So that's all for today, Andy. So I don't want to take some more time today because it's a patching and service pack is a new topic. So better we can start from Monday. So it will take again 1 to 2 classes time for completing the patching and service pack installation. So that's for today, Andy. So I send the yeah.
Malesh,
Go ahead.
can we have the art teacher in the first place? Because
Like here yeah, in the patching and service pack installation we don't discuss about any properties. Like in the installation we discuss many things.
yeah, many things. Yeah,
Yeah, because it's like installation means it's entire server we are covering. Like there are many things, but we have to understand how to install the SQL server. That's not that remaining parts, remaining whatever things we discussed. Again, in the later classes, also we'll discuss. But why I added installation and configuration? Because people will get some confident for confident SQL server.
yeah, yeah.
So
Oh, okay.
that's the reason I added. So the next one is the patching. Again, patching. When you're discussing about patching, we don't discuss about any properties. Just simply we'll install and uninstall and some kind of troubleshooting. So we don't get much like installation when it comes to the patching. After completing the patching, then we'll go with the database architecture.
Sure, sure. Thank you.
So that will start on Monday, Andy. So already I sent the installation file, so we can download from Microsoft site. So maybe 3 to 4 GB size will be there. So and you can, if you get a time, you can practice, and we can also watch the videos if you have any confuse, or maybe after practicing, maybe if you have a time or today or tomorrow to practicing. If you have any questions, please let me know on Monday. Okay, so that's for all for today, Andy. So if we don't have any further questions, so we'll wrap up now, and then we'll catch up on Monday.
Sure, Malesh. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Andy.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a nice day, nice weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.